Welcome to Garden City Church, a place where you can belong before you believe. If you'd like to partner with us here at the channel, there's 3 ways you can do that. You can like and subscribe, you can share this video with a friend, or you can partner with us financially. You can do that through our website or by mailing us a check. We love you guys so much. Let's get into the Word with George.
Who are we against? That's what my son loves to ask whenever we're playing, especially if he wants to play the Hobbit and he wants to be the Hobbit and he wants to fight the goblins or the trolls or the orcs, or when he's playing soccer, like, who are we going to be playing against? And he loves it. And he has like a good sense of competition, loves to play, isn't terribly mean. I've noticed when we move that question, who are we against, from the realm of play and joy and fun even, and we move it into the adult worlds of ideology and institutions and politics, when we really focus on who are we against, it can get really unhealthy really fast. In fact, I think we live in a very us against them world. And when we have an us against them mentality, you're thinking about who's in and who's out and who should be in and who should be out. And you start drawing a lot of lines and focusing on protecting the lines and the walls of who's in and who's out. And you also see a sense of tribalism. This is my tribe, that's their tribe. And this us against them mentality can really start to define itself by the enemy. And in fact, sometimes people don't know how to function without like having a clear enemy. And unfortunately, there are people that take advantage of that. They know that that can really catalyze people, not so much about what we're for. We want to be about what we're against. Who's the enemy? And when you're defined by the enemy, you're defined by who's in, who's out, policing the boundaries, kind of having a security guard mentality about your community and who's in. And then also I've noticed when you define yourself by the enemy and who's in, who's out, you can also have this escalating mirror effect that happens. And what I mean by that is, like, if one group is like disdainful and their posture is just disdainful for who they're against over here, then often the response is disdain right back. There's a mirroring effect, but then it escalates. Like if it goes from kind of a disdain to like an anger, like an angry posture, then like there's another easily mirrored effect of like the fist gets raised and it's mirrored back, and it can escalate to hatred and rage and beyond that and get really toxic. We live in a world that is very easily pulled into this us against them mentality. Let me give you a few stats about this. 86% of Americans say they feel exhausted by the division in America. Can you relate to that percentage, just feeling exhausted? 62% say the political climate prevents them from saying what they believe, like sharing their convictions to their family or friends. They just don't want to, like, put their head up in a world that's us against them. It just doesn't feel safe enough to them. 32% say division has made it difficult to get along with friends or family. Part of me wonders if the percentage from before, that people don't want to share what they really feel, is part of that percentage. Because I wonder if there's a higher percentage than 32% that are struggling to get along with friends or family. At least with people I talk to, it makes me wonder if there might be more. The last thing I'll say is Americans rate division in the country as the most important issue facing them personally. This us against them issue. And that's why we're doing this series called Us for Them. Not us against them, us for them. I think Jesus shows us this way of living and being that teaches us to be us for them. Now, us for them is it's mirroring God's love to the world. Most of you probably know and have heard this verse, for God so loved the world that he gave his son. That's so powerful. God loves the whole world. It doesn't mean that God was for every thought or God is for every action, but God is for people. He loves the world and all of our limitations and brokenness and frailties. God loves us, and we're to be like a mirror image of God. We want to be us for them. In fact, Jesus, when one of his most powerful teachings was in a world of us against them, as a world that says it's good to love your neighbor, good to love your friends and family, but you don't have to love your enemy. But Jesus, in the middle of that world, said, I say, love your enemies. Wow. And then the Apostle Paul picks up on that theme and he writes this: don't pay back anyone for their evil actions with evil actions. Don't mirror the us against them energy, but show respect for what everyone believes is good. And if possible, to the best of your ability, live at peace with all people. To me, I translate that whatever is within your control, your influence, your ability to control yourself, your thoughts, your life, your influence. Live at peace with all people, and don't be defeated by evil, but defeat evil with good. Again, don't kind of like match evil with evil, hate with hate, but defeat evil with good. It's so powerful. We need in our world an us for them mentality and practice. One of the most powerful teachings and many of the practices Jesus gave to people was this ability to move from the us against them mentality to an us for them practice and mentality. I want to look at three movements that I think Jesus demonstrates and teaches that we can use to really embrace and live us for them in a very polarized and divided world right now. The world needs this. In Luke chapter 7, we're going to pick this up. And the first movement is transforming from division into dialogue. So let's pick up in verse 36. One of the Pharisees invited Jesus to eat with him. The Pharisees didn't have like the most positive relationship with Jesus, or at least many of them. Some of them were very curious. Some of them ended up accepting his way of life. But by and large, the Pharisees struggled with Jesus because his teaching threatened them, threatened their power, threatened their way of focusing on who's in, who's out. In fact, the word Pharisee means to divide, to separate. And Jesus was about bringing people together and bridging that gap between themselves and God and with each other. So a Pharisee invites Jesus to eat with him. And after he entered the Pharisee's home, he took his place at the table. Meanwhile, a woman from the city, a sinner, like a known sinner, discovered that Jesus was dining in the Pharisee's house. She brought perfumed oil in a vase made of alabaster, and she entered the room. Do you think that a known sinner, a woman who is a notorious sinner, according to this passage, would be accepted in the house of a Pharisee? How do you feel like the Pharisees felt when she walked in the room? There's a sense of division, right? There's probably a sense of like, what is she doing here? And do you think she realized when she was walking in the room and walking into the Pharisee's house that like the Pharisees would be excited or not excited to see her? Probably not excited. She knew that, but she cared more about what Jesus thought than she cared about what the Pharisees thought. So she enters a room where she knows she's not going to be favored. She's not going to make people happy just being there. But she's drawn there. She's drawn to the love of Jesus. And it says in verse 38, standing behind him at his feet and crying, she began to wet his feet with her tears. And she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured the oil on them. Alabaster is kind of a perfumed oil, very expensive. This would have been something, if she's a renowned sinner, she probably didn't have a lot of money. I'm thinking she spent a lot of money to bring this in. This is a powerful moment, a powerful expression of love toward Jesus. Verse 39, it says, when the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw what was happening, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. If this man was really a rabbi, a teacher, a prophet, he would know what kind of woman this was that's touching him. He would know that she is a sinner, like a sinner of sinners. Now, back in this culture, it's important to know that like the Pharisees and other religious leaders and people viewed any sinner that came into contact with a rabbi or a religious leader would infect them with their sin, like would pass it on, and they would become ritually and religiously unclean. They had all these ceremonies for this. And so they avoided sinners. They avoided Gentiles, anybody who was non-Jewish. Like they wouldn't invite them to their table. They didn't want to be infected with their sin. And so there's this moment where this Pharisee who invites Jesus sees this woman enter, sees her, what she does, and it's an offense to him. It's a moment of division, and it causes him to feel disrespect toward Jesus because he feels disrespect having this woman in there, having this awful moment. And here's the moment where Jesus transforms division into dialogue. Jesus replied, Simon, he calls the Pharisee by name, Simon, I have something to say to you. Some of you might be thinking, man, I would have something to say to Simon too. It might not be that nice. But Jesus is trying to move from division into dialogue. And listen to this. Simon says back, he says, teacher, speak. Can you hear a little bit of the contempt? Can you hear a little bit of the word teacher, like dripping with sarcasm? Because Simon, the Pharisee, has just said, if this man was really a teacher, if he was really a rabbi, if he's really a prophet, he would know what's happening. He would never allow something like this. Like, he has contempt, and contempt often kills the conversation. Disrespect drives more division. And Simon has disrespect toward Jesus. He has contempt. But Jesus doesn't allow the contempt to kill the conversation. He doesn't let disrespect drive more division. He brings dialogue, and dialogue drives discovery. Now let's look at how this dialogue and what this dialogue turns into. And that leads us to the second movement, which is transforming the moment into a mirror. Jesus says in this now moment of dialogue, he says, a certain lender had 2 debtors. He owed enough money to pay 500 people for a day's work. The other owed enough money for 50. When they couldn't pay, the lender forgave the debts of both of them. And then Jesus asked this question, which of them will love him more? So Simon's drawn into this question. And Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the largest debt canceled. And Jesus said, you have judged correctly. He doesn't like say, no, you're wrong, or start a fight, or he just says, yeah, you've judged correctly. And I love how Jesus, in this room that's filled with division because of this expression of love, and people aren't seeing it the way Jesus sees it, they're just seeing division. He kind of takes them outside of the room with this story. He takes them this indirect route, like this journey toward truth and love through dialogue and through this moment that becomes a mirror. And here we're going to see how Jesus does this. He takes them to this story outside the room, and then he brings them back to the tension and division in the room in verse 44. Jesus turned to the woman. He said, Simon, do you see this woman? So it goes from the story and back into the room, back to this woman who is this picture of offense and division for Simon. And then he says this, when I entered your home, you didn't give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with an embrace or a kiss, but she hasn't stopped kissing my feet since I came in. You didn't anoint my head with oil, but she has poured perfumed oil on my feet. This is why I tell you that her many sins have been forgiven. So she has shown great love. The one who is forgiven little loves little. And Jesus brings into this room like this mirror, holds up a mirror so Simon can see himself in what he's doing in the room more clearly, have more self-awareness, and see the truth. Jesus is saying, you have loved little because you think you don't have to be forgiven for much. But you have not treated me with love like this woman who you think is a sinner. She's treated me with greater love than you've treated me this whole time. Simon, you have treated me like an enemy. You haven't embraced me. You haven't taken care of me. Like, this is like a battle line. This whole room feels like it's been a setup from the start. And I'm not interested in having a fight and being us against them. I am for you. Jesus is demonstrating in this dialogue that the way Jesus is loving and forgiving this woman who's an offense to so many religious people, who's a known sinner and does have issues, does have problems, but she realizes it and has come for forgiveness and come out of love. Jesus is saying, the way I am treating her, I am as your enemy, I am also treating you with love, and I'm not treating you as an enemy. And the mirror is held up for Simon to see himself. Oh, that we could turn division into dialogue. And then dialogue sees moments as mirrors to help us see ourselves. I don't know about you, but there's moments where, like when I get emotions go up, my decision making goes down, my posture changes, my thinking changes, and sometimes I just need the mirror held up so I can see myself. And there's moments in our lives with our friends where, and our family and our coworkers, where a mirror needs to just be held up in love and in dialogue to say, hey, what's going on here? What's going on inside? What's going on in the room? And I think we live in a culture right now where we need to have some mirrors held up so we can see ourselves. And I think when we can see ourselves, we become ready for this third movement that Jesus, I think he brings to the room filled with division, and that's this transforming exclusion into embrace. Verse 48, then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other table guests began to say amongst themselves, who is this person that even forgives sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. And when the people are like muttering, who can forgive sins? It's like only God can forgive sins. And then Jesus says, you're forgiven. Go in peace. What a powerful moment where Jesus is demonstrating in this room that's divided, this room that is excluding others because it's us against her, us against the bad ones, us against, we're the righteous, we're the good, and we need to uphold this. And Jesus just like removes that kind of unhealthy dynamic, untrue dichotomy, like there's sinners and non-sinners, like there's broken people and non-broken people. Like we all struggle. We all have issues. Like we all can even be like Simon and see the problems in others and not see the problems in us, in our own heart. And Jesus chooses this way of embrace. Jesus recognizes that there's sin, and he forgives it. He wants to heal. He wants to empower. And so he embraces. And there's this movement, I think, that needs to happen in our hearts. And we don't know what happens with Simon. Like he starts off with this exclusion. Will he move to embrace? That's the question we're left with in this story. And I feel like this is a question for those of us who have been in Simon's shoes. Maybe you might be in the woman's shoes, but many of us in our day and age are in the us versus them shoes of Simon, the path of exclusion, the path of us versus them. And will we make the movement from exclusion to embrace? Will we make the movement from us against them to us for them, the way of love, turning division into dialogue, turning these moments of division into moments of truth and a real mirror? And so that's the question before us. There's a statistic that says 79% of Americans say they would if they were given the opportunity, they would play a part in reducing social division in America. Are we as Jesus followers part of that percentage? Are we willing to do what we can, what's within our control and to the best of our ability to bring peace, to make movements of love, to move out of this framework of us against them, this cycle that just goes on in cycles of revenge and retaliation and retribution and power mongering, all this stuff that we know that's not going to help us become who we want to be and who we're made to be. We know, I think, in our hearts that not the way of Simon, but the way of Jesus is the way that's going to give us the life we want and the life that we want to become. I just want to leave this to you. We're left with this image, this woman, Simon, and Jesus, and this possibility of, even in the divided rooms that you and I might live in maybe our homes and our families, our workplaces. Like, we live in a lot of divided rooms, even in churches and institutions. Are we going to play our part as peacemakers, or are we going to continue the cycle of hurt? Guys, I love you so much. Have a great week.
Be still, my soul. Be still, my soul. Be still and know that my God is here. Be still, my soul. Be still, my soul. Be still and know that my God is here. All that I need to know is this: you are a good God. The maker of heaven calls me his. You are a good God, and your heart beats in my chest. You are a good God. All that I have to do is rest. You are a good God. I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid. My God is here. He will make a way. He will make a way. He will make a way. My God is here. All that I need to know is this: you are a good God. The maker of heaven calls me his. You are a good God, and your heart beats in my chest. You are a good God. All that I have to do is rest. You are a good God. You're never gonna let me down. 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 You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, all that I need to